We have some breaking news right now, separate from that. We just got word that the Secret Service director, Kimberly Cheadle, has resigned. I want to go back to Ryan Nobles on Capitol Hill. Ryan, we were just discussing the questions lawmakers have of the law enforcement actions that day. What do we know about Cheadle's resignation?
We're just getting this information in right now. Our colleague Julia Ainsley has two law enforcement sources that tell NBC News that Director Cheadle has tendered her resignation. It is expected that an official announcement will come in the very near future. This, of course, not really a surprise given the fallout that has occurred since the assassination attempt on former President Trump and her response to that fallout. She's been defiant at times. She was evasive in the many questions that she was asked during this hearing on Monday. And also, when you take a step back, Anna, and look at the way everything progressed to that hearing on Monday, initially she was offered an invitation. The Oversight Committee offered her the opportunity to come voluntarily to that hearing on Monday. She initially rejected that through the Department of Homeland Security, sent a letter offering up a number of alternative dates for her to appear.
Vaughn, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We have the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, speaking about this resignation right now. Let's listen.
Be very sober-minded about the responsibility and take into account the very dangerous times in which we live. We'll do everything we can in the House to ensure that that's true, and I think our task force's work just got even more important. So we'll give you further comment as this develops. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, so we didn't catch much of what Speaker Mike Johnson said. He was one of many who had called for the resignation and called for accountability with the U.S. Secret Service, with Kimberly Cheadle, the head of that agency, going before lawmakers just yesterday on the House Oversight Committee to answer their questions about the failures. She herself called it a failure on the day that this assassination attempt happened just about a week and a half ago in Butler, Pennsylvania, where ultimately Donald Trump was shot in the ear but managed to have non-life-threatening injuries. One man was killed. Two others at that rally were also injured. And Ryan, let me come back to you, because the bottom line here is it was a bipartisan call for her resignation after the hearing yesterday because of the lack of answers that they felt they received from her, the lack of transparency, and ultimately the lack of confidence in her leadership over this agency going forward.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out, Anna, that there were a series of questions in the aftermath of this shooting that members of Congress wanted answered immediately. Like, for instance, how was it that a building could be less than 150 yards away from where the president was going to be, and that the roof of that building be unsecured, not guarded? That was a simple question to a simple answer to a simple question. At least members of Congress viewed it as such. They wanted to know why it was outside the security perimeter, why it wasn't Secret Service that was responsible for that building, and if it weren't Secret Service who were responsible for that building, then who could it possibly be? And there just weren't direct answers to those questions. And so, you know, that was viewed by many members of Congress as an outright failure, that decision to leave that particular building unguarded. And so what they were looking for in this hearing yesterday was an explanation. Well, the reason that we were unable to leave this unguarded, or why that roof was not protected, is because of X, Y, and Z, this protocol that we use. We didn't have enough resources. We had extended that responsibility to local law enforcement. They didn't follow through on that execution. Director Cheadle couldn't answer any of those questions. Now, in her defense, this is not very long after the investigation. She said that the FBI was handling much of the criminal investigation into this, and that it could take as much as 60 days to get the answers to some of those questions. But one of the reasons that members of Congress were so frustrated is that these are problems that need to be fixed immediately. We are now at the heat of a campaign. You have a former president who is running for the office again. He now has a running mate, a vice presidential candidate who needs protection. You now have a current president who's no longer running for office, but now a current vice president who will more than likely become the nominee of the party. That is going to require a tremendous amount of effort by the Secret Service to make sure that every single event that these particular candidates are involved in are secure. So waiting 60 days to get answers to what went wrong is not nearly enough in the minds of many of these members of Congress, because these changes need to be made immediately. And there was just a sense, talking to these members of Congress afterwards, that they didn't have confidence that Director Cheadle understood that urgency, that she was ready to implement reforms right away to fix this process. And so I think that's part of the reason that you saw both Republicans and Democrats come out so quickly and do it in a bipartisan way. They're trying not to make this a political issue, even though politics are involved in the people that are being protected. And it seems as though it just became too much for the director to handle. And at this point, she's made the decision that it's time to step down.